In the high towers of Bay Street, invisibility is not a flaw, it is a skill, and Winifred Okacha had mastered it over 4 years of working for the most dangerous man in Toronto's financial underworld. She was not the kind of woman people remembered when they left a room. She knew this. She had made peace with it somewhere between her 2nd and 3rd year of filing Dorian Ashford's wire transfers, scheduling his offshore consultations, and ensuring that the men who owed him money received their invoices in a format that was impossible to dispute. She wore dark colors. She kept her hair pinned. She answered phones on the first ring and emails within 3 minutes, and she never, not once, gave anyone a reason to look at her twice. That was the point. Dorian Ashford's empire ran on precision and fear in roughly equal measure. He controlled 3 shell corporations registered in the Cayman Islands, 2 legitimate import firms operating out of Hamilton, and a network of men who moved things, money, information, occasionally people, across the Great Lakes corridor without anyone in Ottawa being the wiser. His office on the 52nd floor of the Meridian Tower smelled like cedar and black coffee, and the particular kind of quiet that only enormous wealth can buy. Winifred had learned, early on, that she was the furniture. Not unkindly so, Dorian Ashford was not a cruel employer. He paid her well, extraordinarily well, if she was honest, in the way that powerful men pay for exceptional discretion without ever acknowledging that discretion is what they are purchasing. He had remembered her birthday once, 4 years ago, with a card signed by his assistant, who had, at the time, been her. She had signed it herself, placed it on her own desk, and felt something she could not quite name. She had gone home that evening, made herself pasta, and watched the lake from her apartment window in Parkdale, and decided that this was fine. This was simply the shape of her life. She was 28, carrying more weight than the fashion magazines preferred, and considerably more competence than anyone in that office had ever credited her with. She had a master's degree in financial forensics from the University of Toronto, and a memory that retained numerical sequences the way other people retained song lyrics. Dorian used her abilities the way a man uses a very good knife, reliably, without ceremony, and without wondering too hard about the metallurgy. This was fine. It had been fine right up until the night of the 17th of November, when someone put a bullet through the glass of the 52nd floor conference room, and everything stopped being fine at all. She had been working late. This was not unusual. Winifred worked late the way some people breathe, automatically, without needing to decide to do it. The building had emptied by 7:30. The cleaning crew came through at 8. By 9:15, the floor was hers, the city laid out below her like a circuit board, the CN Tower lit amber against the November sky. She heard the glass break before she heard the shot. The sound was wrong in a way her brain couldn't immediately categorize. A sharp, expensive kind of crack, the way safety glass fails when it's had enough. Then the second sound arrived, lower and more certain, and her body was moving before she had consciously decided to move. She dropped behind her desk. Her heart was doing something she couldn't describe, a stuttering percussion against her sternum that she would later recall with the clinical detachment of someone's a car accident to an insurance adjuster. Papers scattered. Her coffee went cold on the floor beside her left knee. "Get up!" The voice came from her right. She turned, and Dorian Ashford was crouching behind the marble half-wall that divided the reception from the corridor, his suit jacket open, a look on his face that she had never seen before and would spend the next several months trying to accurately remember. He was not afraid, exactly. He was calculating, the way a man calculates when the variables have changed too fast and the outcome depends on the next 30 seconds. "There's a safe room," he said, "behind the server panel. Move." She moved. The safe room was smaller than she'd imagined, which was funny, she thought, because she had never imagined it. She hadn't known it existed. In 4 years of ordering his coffee and managing his calendar and understanding, with forensic precision, the architecture of his criminal finances, she had not known that behind the second server rack on the left, there was a steel door that opened with a 12-digit code, and contained 2 cots, a first aid kit, a water supply, and very little else. Dorian punched in the code without hesitation. The door sealed behind them. The lights inside were red. Emergency mode, she assumed, some kind of power conservation protocol. It gave everything the quality of a darkroom, of something not quite fully developed. She could hear her own breathing, she could hear his. "Are you hit?" he asked. No. She did a quick inventory of herself, the way her father had taught her, fingers, arms, torso, legs. Everything present. "No, you?" "I'm fine." A pause. In the red light, she could see the line of his jaw, the way his shoulders had not entirely come down from the position they'd taken when the shooting started. She had looked at this man for 4 years, across a reception desk, across boardroom tables, across the accumulated paper of his empire. She had never looked at him like this, 6 feet away in a room the size of a large closet, with the ordinary distance of their professional arrangement completely gone. "Who was that?" she asked. "The Vanchetti people." He said it the way someone says the weather is turning, with a kind of resigned recognition. "I had hoped we had more time." "More time for what?" He looked at her then. Not the way he usually looked at her, not past her, not through her, not in the efficient and unseeing way one looks at reliable infrastructure. He looked at her the way a person looks at another person when the usual categories have stopped applying. "To finish the counter move," he said. He paused. "Sit down, Winifred." She sat on the edge of the nearer cot. He sat across from her, elbows on his knees, and for a long moment they were just 2 people in a red room listening to the building decide whether the danger had passed. She didn't intend for what happened next to happen. She would spend a great deal of time in the weeks that followed trying to understand the precise mechanics of it. The adrenaline, she told herself, the red light and the proximity, and the fact that in that room, for the first time in 4 years, Dorian Ashford had looked at her, actually looked, and said her name with the full weight of it rather than as a sound that meant file this, or cancel that, or I'll be in Geneva Thursday. He had told her things in that room, about the network, about the Vanchetti family's long reach across the lake, about his own history, pieces of it, in the flat and careful way of a man who has rarely said anything out loud that he didn't calculate first. And she had listened and asked questions, and at some point he had said, "You understand all of it, don't you?" "You've always understood," and she had said yes because she had. And then, the red light, the silence after the city noises stopped. The particular quality of being 2 people in a room where none of the usual rules about who they were to each other had quite followed them in. She didn't intend for it to happen, but she stopped being furniture, and he stopped not seeing her, and the hours between 2 a.m. and dawn in that steel room were something she carried with her afterward like a stone in a pocket, present in every step, hidden from view, impossible to put down. She asked him to say nothing. She said this the next morning, in the grey light that came under the safe room door, when the building's security team had swept the floor and given the all clear, and it was time to go back to being who they were. She said, "This doesn't need to be a thing. I am not asking you for anything. I am asking you to let me do my job." He had looked at her for a long moment. Then he had nodded. She had taken this as an agreement. She had been wrong about that, as it turned out. But she didn't know it yet. She went home. She slept 4 hours. She showered, put on her dark coat, and went back to work. 6 weeks later, she was kneeling on the floor of the single-stall bathroom on the 48th floor, holding a test she had purchased from the Shoppers Drug Mart on King Street during her lunch break, and waiting for a result that she had already in some wordless and animal part of herself known for 11 days. The word that appeared was unambiguous. She sat on the cold tile floor for what felt like a very long time. Below her, 48 floors down, the city moved on in its ordinary way. The streetcars, the delivery trucks, the pedestrians crossing against the light on bay. The world had not rearranged itself. Only she had. She took a picture of the test on her phone. She deleted it. She put the test in her coat pocket. She washed her hands, looked at herself in the mirror above the sink for exactly as long as it took to make a decision, and then she walked back to her desk. She answered 3 emails. She rescheduled a call with the Geneva office. She booked Dorian's table at Canoe for Thursday and confirmed the car for his 7 a.m. pickup. Then she opened a new browser tab and began looking at openings in Vancouver. She had given herself 2 weeks. That had been the plan. Quiet, orderly, the way she managed everything. Secure a position. Give notice. Leave before it became impossible to leave. She was good at this, at arranging exits, at reading the architecture of a situation and understanding where the load-bearing walls were. She would be fine. She was always fine. The position in Vancouver had come through faster than she'd expected. A financial forensics role with a clean, legitimate firm, the kind that didn't have safe rooms or offshore accounts or men named Vanchetti. The offer letter arrived on a Tuesday. She accepted it on Wednesday morning. She would give notice on Friday. She had not counted on Dorian Ashford reading people the way he read balance sheets. He appeared in the doorway of her office. The small one, her office, which most of the partners seemed to forget existed, on Thursday afternoon at 4:20. He closed the door, which he had never done before. He stood in the particular way he stood when he was thinking faster than he was speaking, weight forward, hands still. "You've been looking at positions," he said. She did not ask how he knew. She knew how he knew. Information was his primary resource. She had managed enough of it on his behalf to understand this. "Yes," she said, "you're pregnant." The room got very quiet. She held his gaze because she had decided somewhere in the bathroom on the 48th floor that she was not going to manage this man's comfort for him. That was not her job anymore. Or it wouldn't be, starting Friday. "Yes," she said again. He was quiet for a moment that stretched long enough to have its own weather. "You were going to leave," he said, "without telling me." "It's my situation to manage," she said. "You don't need to do anything." "Winifred." Something shifted in his voice. Something she hadn't heard before. Not in 4 years of conference calls and corridor exchanges and emergency briefings at 3 in the morning. "You are not someone I need to manage around." "That's very kind of you," she said, and she meant it to come out flat, and it almost did. "That is not what I meant." He moved from the doorway, sat, without being invited, in the chair across from her desk. Her chair, the one she'd brought from home because the company-issued ones gave her back trouble after hour 6. He sat in it the way a man sits when he's decided he's going to stay. "I am going to need you to stop making plans without me." "You don't have any standing to." "I have every standing." His voice was quiet, which was worse than if it had been loud. "I have been standing in the wrong position for 4 years, and I am aware of that. I am not going to do it any longer." She stared at him. "What does that mean?" "It means," he said, "that you are not going to Vancouver." She went home that night and called her cousin in Mississauga, who listened to the entire story without interrupting, which was unusual for her, and then said, "Winifred, that man has had the same coffee order for 4 years and you memorized it on day 2. How did you think this was going to go?" This was not helpful. It was, however, accurate. She did not sleep much. She lay in her apartment in Parkdale and listened to the lake. She could hear it on quiet nights, a low and permanent sound under the city noise, and tried to build a framework around what was happening to her. She was methodical by nature. She believed in frameworks. She believed that if you understood the structure of a thing, you could work within it, or you could work around it, but you could not be surprised by it. She had not built a framework for this. In the 2 weeks that followed, Dorian Ashford did something she had not anticipated. He was patient. He did not press her. He did not appear in her office doorway again uninvited. He sent her a message, a text, which was itself unprecedented. He had never texted her personally. That said only, "I would like to take you to dinner when you are ready." There is no deadline. She read it 7 times. She did not respond for 48 hours. Then she responded, Thursday, 7. He picked her up from her building in Parkdale, which meant he had looked up her address, which she found she could not be entirely angry about. He took her to a small place on Dundas West, not Canoe, not anywhere that his network moved through, somewhere ordinary, with exposed brick and a chalkboard menu and a table in the back that he had clearly reserved under a name she didn't recognize. He asked about her degree. He asked what she'd enjoyed about forensics, about numbers, about the specific pleasure of finding the thing in a ledger that someone had tried to hide. He asked the way a person asks who is paying attention to the answers. She told him. She didn't know why she told him, except that she had been waiting for 4 years for someone in that building to ask. "You've been bored," he said. "I've been useful," she corrected. "Those aren't the same thing." He was quiet for a moment. "No," he said. "They're not." She did not go to Vancouver. This was a decision she made herself, on her own terms, which felt important to establish even if only in her own mind. She renegotiated her role, formally, in writing, with a different title and different responsibilities and a compensation structure that reflected what she actually did rather than what it looked like she was doing. Dorian had signed everything without revision. The pregnancy was not something she had signed up for, and she knew that, and she held on to that knowledge the way you hold on to something in a current, not fighting it, just keeping your footing. She was realistic. She knew what kind of man Dorian Ashford was. She knew the world he moved through, the costs of it, the geography of it. She was not a woman who mistook heat for warmth, or intensity for love, or the particular attention of a dangerous man for something it might not be. But she was also a woman who was good at reading people, and she had been reading Dorian Ashford for 4 years, and she had started to think that what she had always taken for indifference might have been something else. Something closer to a man who had spent too long making sure nothing important to him was visible. She knew the feeling. The Vanchetti situation resolved in March, in the particular way that Dorian situations tended to resolve, quietly, completely, with no useful paperwork. He didn't tell her the details. She didn't ask. She had reached an understanding over the winter of which questions she wanted the answers to and which ones she was better served leaving alone. She was 5 months along by then. She had stopped wearing the dark colors, partly because her body had its own ideas about invisibility now, and partly because she found she had less patience for the effort of it. She wore a blue wrap dress to the Monday morning briefing in April, and sat at the table where she had always sat, slightly to the right and 3 seats down from Dorian, and if any of the men in that room had thoughts about what her presence at that table represented, they were wise enough to keep them to the interior of their own heads. Dorian had ensured this, not loudly. He simply had a way of making clear, without ever saying anything directly, where the lines were. She had watched him do it for years to people who owed him money or favors or answers. It turned out he could also do it in the other direction, in protection rather than extraction, with the same economy of motion. She was not sure what to do with this. The night everything became irrevocable. It was raining, the heavy, warm rain that comes to Toronto in May and smells like something opening. She had been working late again, old habit, though she left earlier now than she used to. She was putting on her coat when he appeared in her doorway. The real doorway this time, the proper one, not a silhouette in an emergency. "I want to tell you something," he said. "All right," she said. "I need you to hear it as a fact and not as a strategy," he said. "Because I'm aware that from your vantage point, those are difficult to distinguish when I'm the one speaking." She set down her bag. "Go ahead." He crossed the room and stood close enough that she could see the lines at the corners of his eyes, the ones that had deepened over the winter. He had not slept well in the winter. She had noticed this, the way she noticed everything, reflexively, and without deciding to. "I have been aware of you," he said, "for considerably longer than I have let on. I want you to know that. What happened in November was not. I am not the kind of man who says things I don't mean, and I am not going to start. I should have been better, faster, less strategic about it. I'm telling you now because I don't want you to make decisions about your life, or our child's life, based on an incomplete picture." She looked at him for a long moment. The rain was loud against the window behind her. The city was doing what the city always did, enormous and indifferent, 52 floors below. "You're saying you saw me," she said, "before November." "I'm saying I saw you on your third day," he said. "I'm saying I found 37 reasons over 4 years not to act on it, and I would like to stop finding reasons." She had been prepared for a number of things. She had frameworks for most of the directions this conversation could go. She had not entirely prepared for honesty delivered with that particular quietness, the kind that has nothing to prove. "I'm not a small risk," she said. "I have opinions about how your money moves. I have opinions about a lot of things. I will not be." She searched for the right word. "Managed, I know," he said. "And then, I'm counting on it." She told her cousin the next morning, and her cousin said again without interrupting, "Obviously. I've been waiting for you to catch up." This was also not helpful. This was also accurate. The formal announcement, when it happened, was not formal at all. It was a Tuesday morning in June, the kind of morning Toronto produces occasionally as an apology for February, clear and gold and so precisely right that it feels slightly unreal. Winifred was in the lobby of the Meridian Tower, early because she was always early, when Dorian arrived and stopped beside her at the security desk. The lobby was full of people. Associates, couriers, the coffee cart that set up by the east entrance, 3 men from the Hamilton office who had come up for a 9 o'clock. The ordinary population of an ordinary Tuesday. Dorian put his hand on the small of her back, gently, with the particular precision of a man doing something for the first time that he has thought about doing for a long time, and said something to the security manager, and then he turned and looked at the room, not announcing anything, not making a speech, just looking in the way he looked at things when he wanted everyone in the vicinity to understand that he had looked. Every person in that lobby understood within approximately 4 seconds what they were being shown. She looked up at him. "Was that necessary?" she said. "Yes," he said. He held the elevator. "After you." She did not become a different person. This would have been the wrong conclusion to draw. She remained someone who answered emails within 3 minutes and retained numerical sequences and had opinions, many of them about the movement of money across the Great Lakes corridor. She remained someone who wore what she wanted and said what she thought, and had not in 30 years ever successfully performed smallness for anyone's comfort. What changed was simpler than that. She stopped disappearing. The baby came in August, a girl, 7 pounds and 4 ounces, with her mother's dark eyes and what would eventually be recognized as her father's complete refusal to be ignored. They named her something neither of them had agreed on until the moment they saw her, at which point they both said the same name at the same time, which was the most surprised Winifred had ever seen Dorian Ashford look in 4 years of paying close attention. She kept the job. She expanded it, technically. The title changed twice in the following year, which she found slightly funny. The role she had always been doing finally had a name that matched it. Dorian, for his part, turned out to be the kind of man who learned things quickly when he decided to pay attention. And he had, she came to understand, decided to pay attention to her specifically and completely, in the way that men like him applied themselves to things they wanted to understand. He was not uncomplicated. Neither was she. This turned out to be fine. This turned out, in fact, to be exactly right. She still arrived early. She still answered on the first ring. She still knew before anyone asked what the numbers meant and where the discrepancies were and which ledger entry was hiding something it shouldn't be. But she no longer did it invisibly. She no longer needed to. In a building full of people who had spent years looking right through her, Winifred Okacha had always been the most important person in the room. It had simply taken everyone else considerably longer to notice.